Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women in and around politics, as well as our active accomplices. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and today my guest is Kate Graham. In the spirit of reconciliation, it's important for me to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land where I live, work, and record from is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, Kainai, Piikani, Tsuut'ina, Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. So today, Kate, I'm so excited to talk to you because you are honestly one of the most interesting women in Canadian politics to me, and I think a lot of others because of everything that you do. So not only did you recently run in the Ontario provincial election, but prior to that, you actually ran for the leadership in that contest for the Ontario Liberal Party. But you're also a professor. You're also the host of the, I would say, very popular and very well-deserved recognition for the podcast No Second Chances, conversations with Canada's female first ministers. And you are the author of at least 2 books, maybe more, I'm not sure. There could be like a whole collection, but Govern Like a Girl, which came out last fall. And then the follow-up, which is called, again, No Second Chances, Women in Political Power in Canada, which just came out recently and is available in the store in Madam Premier. So welcome.
Well, thanks. And most important part of my bio is I am a huge Sarah and Madam Premier fan. I'm so happy that you're doing all the work that you are. We are better in Canada for it. And so really excited that we get to talk today. So thanks for having me.
Well, to me, it's a shame that you live in Ontario and I'm in Alberta because in my mind, we would be having dinner parties and our kids would be playing together regularly. And, there just happens to be Saskatchewan and Manitoba between us.
But I mean, the power of Zoom, it's an anytime thing. And I have had the good pleasure of visiting you in the store in Calgary, and I'll keep doing.
I know that was a surprise when you walked in, and that was a delightful morning. And because when you were here that day, you very graciously signed all the copies that I had at the time of Govern Like a Girl, which people loved. If and when you come back, I'm going to get you just to sign all the copies.
Yeah, people don't tell you when you write a book, one of the things you have to do is sign your name a lot of times.
Did you create a book signature, or did you have because it's kind of like you're a celebrity and you're autographing things. I'm guessing it's not the same signature for your credit card.
Yeah, it is.
Okay.
When we first published it, the publisher sent me these, what they called book plates, which I had no idea. I tried to act like I knew what they were talking about. And they were like, we're going to send you book plates. I'm like, okay, which is just a sticker they were putting in a series of promos, books they were sending out. But it arrived and it was hundreds of these stickers to just sit and sign. And maybe there are more efficient ways of doing it, but no, I just grab a pen and go for it. So
yeah. Well, I'm sure that you're, it's lovely, and people were the copies that I did have that had your signature in them. It really meant a lot to them.
Okay.
They really, that was a very special thing to them.
Okay.
So we're going to talk more about your books a little bit from now. But first, the Ontario provincial election. There's a lot that we could talk about. But you ran in London North Centre as it was interesting interesting campaign to watch.
Yeah.
What was it like to run in this election?
Yeah, no, I'm, we're a few weeks out from the election. So I think I'm still, to be honest, kind of processing it myself. So just as context for anybody listening. So I ran in 2018. It was my first time running, and, I've been interested in politics for a long time, but first time stepping forward. And it was like a crushing historic defeat for the Ontario Liberal Party. We went from a majority government, losing official party status. Kathleen Wynne, our first female leader and female premier, was, I don't know how to say it, like, have literally written a book to try to understand this phenomena, but
not given a second chance.
Not given a second chance. Yeah. And so for the last 4 years, I've been a big part of trying to rebuild the party, which has included a listing project across Canada, included running for leader. It included leading the party's platform work over the last year and a half, helping to recruit. It was the first time we've run a slate of 50% female and 50% from underrepresented communities candidates, and then ran myself as a candidate again in London North Centre. And so it's been kind of a 4-year runway for this election. And, the result was not much different than in 2018. We still don't have official party status. We had a really low turnout election in Ontario. And with 18% of Ontarians casting a vote for him, Doug Ford has a larger mandate than he had before. So, it was certainly a bit disappointing for me personally to not be successful in London North Centre, but definitely the bigger punch in the gut kind of feeling on election night was, all of this work of trying to transform a party and put forward, we had a really detailed and like super engaged platform process with, I thought, really big ideas that would help people as we come through the pandemic. And it wasn't enough to get people excited. The turnout was our big problem. Like, we had every metric inside the campaign looked pretty good, and doing get out the vote, like up to the last hour on election day, I was out knocking on doors. And the conversation that I think is going to be unfortunately kind of burned into my brain forever is I was standing on somebody's doorstep, and her voting station was the high school across the street. And I was like, I'd knocked on her door twice already, sign on the front lawn with my name on it. And she hadn't voted yet. And we get that information from Elections Ontario throughout the day. And so I knocked on her door, and we had thousands of these people left, people who had been ID'd supporting us and hadn't voted yet. So I knocked on her door, and I'm like, there's 1 hour left. Like, are you going to be able to go across the street and cast your ballot? And she was like, I don't know. Like, it's been kind of a long day. I'm kind of busy tonight. And I'm like, for 4 years as a volunteer, I and lots and lots of other people have been trying to build a party that can get you excited and put together ideas that will help you and your kids and your family, and you can't walk across the street. And that was the sort of soul crushing part. And that was true across the province. So we had, a historically low turnout, and we were missing the key ingredient, which was putting forward something that actually makes people care enough to get out and vote. So that was kind of a long answer, but I mean, the campaign experience is always great. I find it really energizing. I really enjoy it. But the outcome this time, as I said, it sort of felt like a punch in the gut, just seeing that we hadn't done what we set out to do, which was build a party and a vision that people could get behind. So lots to think about what the lessons are coming out of that.
Well, and so you mentioned turnout. So turnout was 43%, which is, and that's going off of memory now, but I actually believe that's the officially like the lowest turnout. I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Think you do. And it was even a little lower.
It was lower than 2018.
It's around 40%.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And the NDP. So the NDP came away with 10 fewer seats. Yeah. The Liberals have 8, I believe, MPPs. Or no, you needed 8 to form. How many do you have now?
I believe it's 9, and we needed 12 to have official party status.
Okay, yeah, 8.
Yeah.
So yes, that's right. You in your own race finished 3rd. So the incumbent, who was an NDP candidate, won.
Yep.
I saw a CBC article that from right after the election that quoted you, and you used the phrases "look inward" and "long game," which so tell me, like, what for the Ontario Liberal Party going forward? What is that looking inward and long game going to be like? And will you be a part of it?
Yeah. Well, so I think that's because and this is again where I personally really want to reflect to a deeper level than I have less than 3 weeks out. But, you know, when I think about the things that we as a party needed to do, like I'm thinking the same things right now that I was thinking in 2018 after we lost. And, you know, we need to run a diverse slate of candidates. We need to have a big platform that, you know, is with thousands of fingerprints on it of people who build the process across the province. We need a leadership race that's more than just who the leader is, but like leadership, meaning like a shared kind of coming together to make something happen. And I still think all those things are needed. But we tried our best and it didn't work. So I think something is missing. So yeah, I'm sure that process will be again. And it also, you know, there's only so much we can control in these, and this is what a lot of smarter people than I have been kind of saying as we've been chatting over the last few weeks. So sometimes there's moments where there just isn't a desire for any kind of change. I do think people are kind of tired and kind of burnt out, and they've had a lot of change and disruption in their lives. And so maybe this just wasn't the moment for it, or maybe there are things that, you know, there's always things that can be done better, but maybe there are big things that we were missing. So I'm not exactly sure what that looks like. I certainly don't know, you know, that will need to be a big team of people coming together. And, you know, I don't know what exactly that looks like yet, but yeah, the one good thing when there's, you know, these crushing defeats that you, the feeling of being punched in the gut, it causes a lot of thinking, and you know, I think you grow a lot more in moments like that than when everything is easy and successful in the big celebration party. And then you get to work. Like we have the gift, I guess, I suppose, of having some time now to think about what does it mean to, why does Ontario need a Liberal Party, first of all? What are the things that we want to change in this province, and how do we want to make people's lives better? And then how do we build a party that can get people fired up? Because it didn't happen this time.
Well, and I mean, it's interesting because Doug Ford came back with an even stronger majority.
Yeah.
And in contrast to what I commonly see on Twitter, and his a mix of, I would say, mostly extreme unpopularity in that space for him, at least from the times that I see, you know, that is clearly not what Ontarians went, those who did, of the 43%. That's not what that wasn't the view that they took on it. And they gave him an even stronger mandate. And, you know, it was interesting that, you know, his campaign strategy was, I think, get it done.
Yeah.
And
after 4 years of literally not getting it done, which I laughed out loud when I first heard that. And
I know
it
seemed like it seemed too simple and kind of hokey, but it really worked, I think, for him and the campaign. I mean, another, let's call it an opportunity now coming out of the election and the loss, is that you also, you're leaderless. So there's the opportunity to, you know, reinvigorate the party with a new leader. Is there any timeline yet on when the wheels will start turning on that process?
Certainly not that I have heard. I hope we take, you know, I think after the last election, again, we need a different template than what we did last time, for sure. After the last election, the first about 6 months, I think, to 8 months was a listening project. We had an opportunity for every candidate to share what they were hearing at the doors about what worked and what didn't. The party had a kind of coming together in the fall to talk about what was learned through the race. There were a number of things changed within the party, like opening up the party to free memberships, a real focus on paying off our debt and getting into solid financial ground, and so on. So there are a few things that needed to happen before focusing on the leadership. And I really hope we do that again, because again, I think there's big lessons out of every election, and that's definitely true out of this one. So no timeline, at least not that I'm aware of.
Okay. It's interesting. I've also seen talk of, you know, the woulda, shoulda, coulda, but in terms of electoral reform, and if electoral reform came to Ontario, would the results have been different? And would voter turnout have been higher? Do you think with electoral reform, if that was to come to Ontario, and let's just say under a Doug Ford government, electoral reform will not not be on his political agenda, because first past the post works for him.
Yeah.
But what do you think?
Oh, I've long been a fan of PR, and I mean, we should the Green Party, perhaps more than us, but I think now like we're kind of a poster child of like when 25% of the electorate votes for you, and you end up with, not even holding official party status. Like, and it's part of it's about vote efficiency. I understand that, but we now have a government that does not reflect the intentions of people. As I said, of people eligible to vote, fewer than 1 in 5 voted for Doug Ford, and he has 100% of the power in Ontario now for the next 4 years. And that is ridiculous. And that's not even thinking about the other benefits of, countries that have taken electoral reform seriously, where, more collaboration between parties, opportunities to work together. Like look, places like New Zealand, where you see multiple parties represented in a cabinet, like how, even when there's a majority government in place, like how cool is that, right? To get to draw on the best expertise of multiple parties. And we don't have that. This winner takes all in Ontario, I think it certainly delivers, and we see this, very, very strongly in Ontario in this particular moment, but it delivers governments that don't reflect what people wanted. And I think it also has the sort of disadvantage of it discourages parties from being able to work together on things that they share an interest in. And I mean, between the NDP, the Greens, and the Liberals in Ontario, a lot of things that are similar in the platforms, a lot of similar ambitions, and it's just not a system that rewards working together. And it doesn't have to be that way. So yeah, the results would definitely have been different just mathematically if we had a different way of counting up votes and turning out a government from it. But I think it would also change Ontario politics in a lot of really good ways. So I'm perhaps an even bigger fan of electoral reform now than I was in the past.
Well, I mean, I always appreciate hearing, why people are advocates for electoral reform. I'll tell you why I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not a fan of electoral reform, not because I don't want more people, more women, more marginalized voices, more diversity at the table. That is absolutely not why. But under those systems, you do see fringe candidates get elected much more commonly, and
Yep.
They can be extreme voices.
Yep.
And when they have a seat at the table, it establishes them as legitimate and gives them a larger platform and a larger opportunity to share their extremist views. And so, and I can understand why someone would be like, hey, Sarah, maybe that's not a good enough reason. But I think what makes it more concerning to me is the global political climate and the rise of nationalism and the seemingly the increase of populism, both in Canada and, obviously in the States and abroad. And so my fear is that I see the danger in that. I see the real danger. And then also on the side of, so depending on the system that you use, so what does the ballot look like? And who decides who is on the ballot and in what order? Because if it's if the opportunity is given to political parties to decide, like for example, in let's say riding A, and there are going to be this number of candidates on the ballot for this political party. Okay, who is the first name at the top of the ballot? Or is it, and how is it decided? Where those people run and how are they appointed? And so for me, it's the systemic barriers and the systemic issues of the political process in that the systems have all been built by men. And so unless there are conversations and a level of transparency to open up that process to ensure that, women are given, the opportunity to run and win in winnable ridings, or that, it's not my buddies, Joe, Tim, and Steve who get put at the top of the ballot in case, people are more likely to just vote the top of the ticket. So a lot of those things are, and I know that's like really in the weeds of like the details of those systems, but that's why I'm concerned, because I would want it to work in favor of women, to work in favor of people who have traditionally been left out of the political system. And unless those issues were addressed for me, I in some ways, it's the devil you know versus the devil you don't.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of, and myself included, like share, we need to protect our political system from being able to be taken over really by, particular, like I agree with what you are saying, but I think there's so many different variations on these systems. And there's enough cases now around the world, people who have tinkered and tried different models and different approaches, including the electoral system, but also how do parties work within that system. And I personally think a really thoughtful, open exploration about what is the right system for, a province like Ontario or for Canada is much needed. And I think a lot of people approach this, including political parties, I think they're perhaps the worst for it, with like, well, I want a system that benefits me, or I want a system that produces the outcome.
Everyone does.
Right? And even like
right?
the advocates in this space, bless their hearts, are wonderful. But like, I think part of the challenge has been like, they're like, well, this specific version is the thing that I want and anything else is not good. And so we haven't had the sort of, let's detach ourselves from like the system design and start back with first principles about our democracy, because there are big red flags, like 5-alarm fire kind of problems. I think right now, when turnout is really low, when you see that you can't walk across the street to vote because it feels totally irrelevant to you, when politics is such a turnoff that huge groups of people are totally underrepresented, in part because they do not want to be a part of it for very good reason, right? When campaign finance, I do think we're moving more towards like, you have to be able to raise like huge amounts of money to even run in a riding race, let alone run for, I had to raise about $250,000 to run in a leadership race, right? Like that's hard. There are certain things now that like, it is becoming a less and less accessible, approachable, engaging, likable. People feel so turned off by the whole thing. And so if we were to step back and say like, these are problems with the system we've created, and the system doesn't have to look like that. And instead of jumping to like, well, I like this particular version of STV.
I want STV.
I want,
but I want multi-member,
Yeah. So I think like an openness to say, okay, some things about this are not working, and there are a hell of a lot of different options out there. And so why don't we take a look at what those are, and who does that? And like, there's devil's always in the details to figure that out. But I feel more.
Do you think there's a risk of like, if we start, if there are opportunities to go through that process and to talk about alternatives to first past the post, does that risk making politics seem even more complicated to people?
I think, yeah. So a small case study. So I worked at the City of London when we moved towards ranked ballots for the first time, and people were like, oh my gosh, it's so complicated. What will it mean if this happens? And, in that particular election, everybody who won through the ranked ballot would have won on the first, if it had been just a first past the post election. So people were like, well, it didn't even matter, all this extra work. But once a system was designed and, through the genius of good communicators, it was on the back of every bus. It was like, it's as easy as 1, 2, 3. Vote for 1, 2, 3, just like you do in your normal life. It's like, you're out for a date night with your partner. You're like, I'd like to see this movie and you want to see this one. And you kind of figure out like where you can meet. Like, people make more complicated choices than that in their day-to-day lives. And so, there's a lot of complexity in designing a system, but I think there are ways also to make engaging with it simpler and easier, but better able to deliver the big things that we need, like governments that reflect what people want, like a political culture that people actually want to be a part of, which we do not have in Canada, or in most, at least any of the provinces I'm aware of right now. So there's some big problems that are worth fixing and need an openness to fix them. So yeah, I'm not pretending to have the answers, but I'm increasingly.
No, but I think it comes from having conversations, right?
So,
yeah, there need to be conversations. Well, it's also, I mean, on the flip side, I thought it was really interesting, and kudos to her. But one independent was elected in the Ontario election. Bobby Ann Brady. She beat the PC candidate by about 4.5%, which is, like
hard.
Hard. And so, and I do think there needs to be more space in politics for independent candidates. She's going to have a tough time in terms of, navigating the legislature and the political process and, within that system. But so like there should be space for independent candidates. There should be space for, but like, yeah, how do we get people engaged? How do we get that woman on the woman you spoke with to feel like, that time to go across the street matters, that, having a lawn sign is great. Right. But like the most important thing you can do is voting, like, because signs don't vote.
Yes.
They don't get up. They don't take their little metal pegs and walk across the street and go walk into the ballot box.
Which is a good people
robot sign
yeah, people
voters.
Game that bad.
Right. Robot sign voters. So yeah, it's a great opportunity for the Ontario Liberals. Big questions, looking for big solutions.
Yep.
And whatever your role in that is, I think is very valuable, based on your experience. And we will all be watching from in and outside of Ontario to see what transpires. So moving on to, let's talk about your books. I was going to hold it up, but you can't see it in my hand. I have my own copy of No Second Chances, Women in Political Power in Canada. It just came out, a few weeks ago. It actually, I don't know if the timing was interesting because it was released during the campaign.
Yeah.
So when it happens, it all happens at once. So please tell me, for anyone who doesn't know, can you give a brief, or not brief, an explainer of, the history of the podcast, and then how did the books come to be?
Sure. So yeah, the books explore a phenomena in Canada where, in a country where we re-elect incumbents all the time, we have never re-elected a female first minister. So as I said earlier, I ran in 2018 while Kathleen Wynne was the premier, and it was a sort of classic example of what we've seen happen with the 13, now 14 women who've served in a first minister role, where they tend to rise in tough circumstances. They last about half as long as men, and when they run for re-election, they lose. So I wanted to understand why that is. And, as a political scientist, this is the way I understand things as I go into a research project on them. So I traveled across the country and I interviewed all of these women, not all of these women, almost all of these women, and had the good fortune of partnering with Canada 2020. And they sent a videographer and a phenomenal audio guy with me who could capture this. And then we turned it into a podcast and a book. And so it really explores, in the voices and perspectives of the women who have lived it, why we don't see women in our top leadership roles as often. We're now sitting around 4 and 5% of all of our first ministers in Canada have been women. And even those women, they are, other than in the territories where they're Indigenous women, it's mostly white women, it's mostly privileged women, it's able-bodied women, it's mostly straight women. So even the few who have broken through, certainly we have an extremely long way to go before our leaders actually reflect the diversity that is Canada. So using this small sample of women who have broken through that ceiling, wanted to understand why we don't see women last once they get into these roles, and why we see them not able to achieve that second chance. So the book captures the kids' book tells stories about these women when they're children, and the adult book captures in long form the interviews, so that anyone who's interested in hearing again about this from the perspectives of the people who've lived it can hear it directly or read it directly from them.
And so I've read it and I love it. I've also listened to the podcast, and then it's really interesting because all of the women come from they all have different takes on politics. They all have different takes on what helped them and what hurt them. And And it's really fascinating to read each of the chapters, which is each one woman. And you give kind of an intro into each one before you get into the actual questions. But I wanted to steal some of your own excellent questions from the book and ask you. So the first one comes from, and obviously I'm in Alberta, so I've picked two, Alison Redford and Rachel Notley. So questions that you asked them. So the first one comes from the chapter with Rachel Notley, and you asked her, for women who are thinking about getting into politics, watching what happened, you said here, may be disheartening. What would you say to them? So I want to put that in the context of what would you say to women in Ontario who are feeling disappointed with the results of the election?
Yeah, like it's a good question, but that seems. I think it's an important question because we need to acknowledge, like, especially I'm thinking now of women in Ontario who've, maybe volunteered or voted or got involved in the campaign in some way. And then when you have a crushing defeat, it can really be demoralizing. But politics is a long game and nothing affects more people. And so it's worth it. Even the moments where you feel like it didn't matter and you didn't accomplish what you wanted, like it actually does matter. And, in a campaign, even where, I've just lost an election, and yet I know that I knocked on thousands of doors, and a bunch of them were opened by little girls who saw a woman standing there. And I got down on my knees and I asked them about the change they want to see in their school or in their neighborhood. And those conversations matter. And maybe one of them is going to be the Premier of Ontario someday. Who knows? People decided to join the campaign for the first time, and they got the experience of talking to other people in their community about politics. The experience of running is, for me anyway, it's been the most I've ever learned about politics. And I say this as something like, I have a PhD in political science and I teach political science, and I've learned more about politics on people's doorsteps than in any form of formal education. You grow a lot as a person, you become a better citizen. We really misunderstand what campaigns are when we reduce them to like, did you win? Yes or no? Because the fullness of the experience is much harder to capture and way more important. So for anybody who's feeling kind of demoralized, but thinking, should I just, go back to my normal, easier life than this, or should I put it all on the line and join a campaign or run or get involved in some way or speak up on an issue that matters? I actually think in these moments where, I'll say sort of a partisan thing in Ontario, like we have a government that most Ontarians didn't ask for. And so speaking up about things that matter, I think is even more important now, whether that's inside or outside the formality of political institutions. So the long story is, it's okay to take a little bit of time and feel down and try to learn things from the experience, but, just packing it in is not an option. Like nothing affects more people in politics. And so find it in yourself about what it is that you care about and what do you want to change in this world, and then give it 100%, because it won't change without you. And even if it isn't successful, maybe you have an impact on somebody that does have success later on down the road. So it's a long game. It matters. Go for it. Yeah, we need you. That would be my advice.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, and it's been interesting for me to see in the store because I have a lot of conversations with women about politics on a daily basis.
Yeah.
And in the last little while, there have been more women who have felt, who have been touched by a very specific issue, which has them questioning their past complacency, or they've just, because that can sound harsh, complacency, but I mean, it's also maybe their own privilege in the system in that, something hasn't, touched them. It seems it's always been someone else. It's been something on the news. It's been someone else's family. It's been someone else's problem. And, we're seeing some things happen globally. And I think, some currents nationally here in Canada where people are starting to kind of, specifically women, are being like, this has touched me in a way where, like I'm now awake and I'm paying more attention. And I think that is super significant. And then when they see women like you, and it's so much of it is put on the result, but again, so much of it is the moments that you make and create and have at the doorstep and with girls. There are metrics beyond. I mean, I do believe that the most important metric is winning, to be honest, but there are other really important metrics along the way.
Yeah.
And so I just wanted to, and I have always been, I'm very inspired by all of the work that you do through No Second Chances and in your work as a poli-sci professor and in your political life. And so I had done some of my own research. So I'm going to rattle off some numbers pretty quickly. So one is the number of women, and this is in the book, obviously, who have served as Prime Minister of Canada. 23, the number of men who have served as Prime Minister of Canada. 13, the number of women who have served as a premier or a province or territory in Canada. 271, the number of men who have served as a premier or of a province or territory in Canada. 36, the number of male prime ministers and premiers named John. 18, the number of male prime ministers and premiers named either William or the short form Bill. 36 and 18, those are both greater than just the list of women who have served as Canada's first ministers. So when someone says to you, like, to me, it's because this is something I hear a lot. You're making this about her being a woman. To me, and I'm pretending to be, a voter, whoever. And I hear this, I'm sure you might hear this too, is like, what happened to voting for the most qualified person? Did you get that at the doors at all? Or do you hear that in your life? And how do you respond to that?
Yes. So when I was running for the leadership, and again, we just had defeat, Kathleen Wynne was the leader. And I had people say to me, believe it or not, they actually said this out loud. We just had a woman and look how that turned out. So why would we try another? And I want to say, can you imagine saying that? Like, we just had a dude and that didn't work out. So I guess we better stick with it. Like, it's just such a preposterous idea. And I think it speaks to the way things are today. People sort of assume that they're fixed and they have to be that way and they can't be changed. But like, all of these things actually are systems that we built and that we can change. And the fact that the vast majority of Canada's political leaders have been older, white, straight, affluent men, that one single demographic has been so heavily overrepresented for so long that, people think it's like, well, we can't change that. And in fact, we have to change that. Like, that is part of the lack of legitimacy in our democracy right now. It has to change. So yes, I think, we assume that things that are must be, and that's not true. And we assume that we don't have the power to change them. And, the quickest way to give your power away is to assume that you don't have any. And that's just not true, right? We all have more power than we think we do to change the systems around us. So I think when in those moments where people say, what about qualifications, not understanding that the way that they're defining qualifications is fundamentally sexist and informed by systems of patriarchy. Or when people say, we just had a woman, why wouldn't we try another? Not appreciating the ridiculousness of it. It just, I know it's infuriating. I certainly feel that way myself, but it has to be the fuel to say, that has to change. That is not good enough. We must change this world so that the way people understand things to be is different than it is today.
Agreed. It drives me really crazy because I've, like, oh, you are only voting for her because she's a woman. No, actually, she is the most qualified person and she is a woman. Actually, so we at Madam Premier, so we have a book club, and the last book club that we did was on your book.
Oh.
And so there was some really thoughtful conversation around, things in the book and then themes as well. Around this, and this very specific thing that we're talking about now around, like, she's qualified and she's a woman. And, the common sentiment from that evening was that being a woman is actually like it allows you to make better decisions. It allows you, like, that lived experience is an asset and a qualification. And it's not necessarily one that we put that way, but in terms of, like, thinking about education policy or criminal justice or criminal justice reform, or there are just so many childcare, like the list goes on and on and on and on, thinking about the experiences of women and how, for the most part, for a very, 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 very long time, and still to this day, there are a lot of people who don't understand those issues from that perspective and end up making policies that don't ultimately benefit the people that they're making them for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I actually think this from terms like gender and politics, this idea of qualifications is like, it's one of the nuts that we have to crack. And it's just, this is not like a normal job. Like if you looked at our political leaders, you would think we were hiring for a senior partner at a law firm, like
you would, but
a Bay Street law firm. But that is not the job. This is about a willingness to serve people, and it is about representing people. So part of the qualification is people's lived, like I want to see more moms in politics. I want to see people who've lived in poverty. I want to see people who've experienced racism, who experience racism every day. I want to see people who know what it's like to have to wait tables to pay tuition. Like
who come from other countries seeking,
yes.
A better life, who are refugees, who
reflect Canada. The job is representing people and having that willingness to serve and a heart of service. But the qualification is about your ability to do that. And so when the vast majority of the people have, they're quite affluent and quite singular in terms of the demographic that's been represented, especially at the top levels. It's getting better now when we look at all MPPs or MLAs or MPs, but that has not filtered up to leadership levels yet. And the idea that qualification is some resume and the boards you've sat on, the degrees you hold, it's just like, it's a total garbage way of selecting elected officials. It's a misunderstanding about what the job is. And it prevents great candidates from running because they think, well, I don't have an MBA and I haven't been a partner at a law firm and I don't have a whole bunch of friends that can donate the maximum donation. So I guess I'm not qualified. And it's like, no, that is garbage. What qualifies you is your ability to represent the people in the world and the Canada and the Ontario and so on that and that you've got that desire to serve. That is the singular qualification that you need. And we need a diversity of women to know that.
Let's just think about Andrew Scheer. So, and like so many men in politics, and this isn't exclusive to Canada, but young men who get involved in politics at a very young age, and their career becomes politics.
Yeah.
So Andrew Scheer in the last federal election, when he was running, it came out that he wasn't even a fully qualified insurance salesperson. To me, so women are disqualifying themselves, who are maybe lawyers, who are moms, and being a mom is essentially being a CEO, in my opinion, because of the demands and it's just an extraordinary, the amount of responsibility and the demands of you are just immense. And so, there are so many, sorry, Andrew Scheer, mediocre men who spend a lifetime in politics, who climb the ranks and get in these positions of power. And there are so many women who do so much and are so qualified and who should be in these spaces and yet don't. And Andrew Scheer could have been our prime minister. Like, what qualifications? So like, who are you comparing yourself to? What narratives are we telling ourselves? I don't know if it needs to be like a banner that flies through the sky behind a plane that just says like, yes, you're qualified. And I mean, it's, there's someone who makes a card with it that I have here in the store that says, do it with the confidence of a mediocre white man. We really do need to start doing things with the confidence of mediocre men, because they take up space like nobody's business. They are they put up their hands, they go for the job. Doesn't matter, we need to start doing it. We are qualified. We do deserve to be in those spaces. I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think there's things we as individuals can do in terms of encouraging the people around us. But I also think that the institutions of politics need to change and show that they get this. I think a classic example is of AOC in the States, where they really opened up the recruitment process. They asked people to nominate, and AOC's little brother said, my sister is a waitress in a taco shop, but she is really good at talking to people, and she's got big ideas. And, it was not her resume that I put that in air quotes for people who can't, because it's audio, but like qualifies her for office. It was her desire to change the world around her and use the life experience that she's had to make change that helped other people. And she has some real gifts, like communication is she's extraordinarily good at putting complicated ideas into simple terms. But, her brother nominated her and said she's real good at these things. And, you should look at her and look at the things that she's doing now. So we have to change how we think about qualifications as individuals, definitely women, and definitely women from, backgrounds of equity deserving groups who, count themselves out as not being qualified because of these bullshit ideas we have about qualifications. But parties also need to take some ownership in this and say, we are going to very vocally express what we consider to be a qualified candidate, and it isn't an MBA and a whole bunch of boards. That's great, and that is one form of being qualified. But lived experience in poverty is another form of qualification, or experiencing Islamophobia and having a real heart to change that. That is also a really important qualification that we need on our team. And so if you have that, doors are wide open for you. So I think parties have a long way to go to really show that they get it, that qualification is not the things that you still tend to see. The reason we've had so many people with similar qualifications who have kind of similar resumes is because we've determined that to be synonymous with qualifications. And it's not.
Agreed. Okay. Second question from the book. And then I have one more question to wrap things up for today. So the second question comes from the chapter on Alison Redford. Okay. And you asked Alison, what would you like to see change in Canadian politics so more women can lead and feel more able to be who they are?
Yes, it's kind of similar to the last discussion, but I do think we need a culture change in how we do politics. So when you think about the most successful organizations or teams in the world, they don't work the way that our politics do. Like even the idea of, the hyper-partisanship, parties like just ripping each other down at every opportunity. Like you don't see car companies or, Pepsi and Coke doing that to each other, because it would erode people's trust in the whole product category, right? It's against their interest. And yet that is how we've sort of accepted that campaigns should be won and that parties should operate. And it creates this really divisive, negative, it's a real turnoff for people. I think it disproportionately keeps women out. People who are quieter and more thoughtful, definitely not interested in stepping into that. So we need a change in how politics is done, where it's more about outcomes and being able to help people and less about winning at all costs, and winning being understood as, your opponent's losing. Because instead, and this might sound really Pollyanna or like, rosy, but like, I don't care because I still think it. And I believe that there are ways of doing politics that is not as combative and that provides opportunities and really rewards and incentivizes working together when it matters. Like, climate change, inequality, people's total distrust of political institutions. Like those three problems alone are big enough and important enough that every party should be working on them. And we should be expecting that as Canadians all the time. And we should have no tolerance when they're not working towards that. And yet the way we do politics is the opposite of that. So if there's one thing I would like to, if you could snap a finger and it would be done, it would be to change the culture of how politics is done so that it is more about people and outcomes and less about the kind of electoral stuff, winning, losing, ripping down your opponent. Because it's a good short game and it's a horrible long game.
Maybe that's the title of your next book, or maybe an autobiography one day. The Long Game by Kate Graham. Kate's Long Game.
This is one benefit of being spending a lot of time with students in political science undergrad classes, is it provides a lot of space to talk about big ideas and get people debating and thinking and throwing out their wild ideas. And so I'm looking forward to exploring some of these things in my classes in the year upcoming, because they're definitely fresh in there now.
Those would be great discussions. Well, and also I'll mention that one other conversation, that one thought that I had from our book club when we were going over No Second Chances is talking about Rachel Notley and going into an election next year here in Alberta provincially. And she has an opportunity again, another chance. But thinking, what if the NDP in Alberta aren't successful? What will they do? What will the outcome be for Rachel Notley coming as a potential fallout from that election? And will she be given another chance to take on will she be given the opportunity and have the authority to lead the NTP still? Or, what does her future look like? How many chances will she be given to lead that party? And then it got me thinking, so here's an idea for another book. Conversations with women who have been in opposition. So opposition party leaders. So they've had chances, but they've never had that first chance to be the premier. So, what have those experiences been like for them? So
that would be interesting. Yeah. Well, I think people all across the country are going to be paying attention to Alberta next year. And I really hope that Rachel is that second chance, that second elected mandate, because, she's been just terrific. And you'll have more knowledge about Alberta politics certainly than I do, but it is a really important election. I think for anybody who cares about gender and politics, is all eyes will be on what happens with Alberta's NDP.
Yeah, it's going to be it's a lot. It's a lot. Politics in Alberta are a lot. Okay, so my last question and then we'll to wrap things up is, so my new question to every guest that comes on to Elected is, so to end things in a really positive way, and to share something about yourself. So that you might not, because it's so easy to default to thinking about like the negative. And so my question to you is, what is Kate Graham's superpower?
Oh, I think it is optimism. I think so. I am lucky in that I gravitate towards a more positive take on things, and that's been true of me since I was a kid. And even losing elections and so on, like I feel devastated by the loss, but I certainly don't feel like all is lost. Like I feel just as excited about the power of politics to make good things happen now as I did, before losing in a crushing defeat as a whole party 3 weeks ago. So, but I do think that's something that, for all of us, there's lots of things you can't choose, but choosing what to focus on and picking things that get you excited and that fill you with hope is a possibility for us. And so I think, for anybody who is needing a little joy and inspiration in their life right now, and I'm going to be thinking about this summer as I consider what's ahead, is just really focus on what are the things you feel most hopeful and most excited about changing, and then believe and know that, I know I said this earlier, but like, you have more power than you think you do. You have the ability to do more than you think that you do. So I think the superpower is optimism and a willingness to go for it, even if it's not easy, or even if it doesn't result in success, but a belief that better is possible. And that's something that I don't doubt. It's not a faith for me. It's knowledge. We can change the world. That is something each of us have the ability to do.
Well, maybe, and I think I may have just heard a future campaign slogan: better is possible.
Surely, I actually think a few parties have tried things along those lines, but
yes,
yeah. Anyway, I'm so glad to hear. I know you want to wrap up here, but I am super glad that you are hosting this and doing the work that you are and talking about gender, but you make it fun, and you're like, I could spend every dollar in my bank account at your store. It's funny and sarcastic and does not take itself too serious. It's a serious topic, but you make it fun and interesting and give all of us as politicos across the country cool opportunities to get engaged with it. And these things wouldn't exist without you. So you are doing that. You are changing this world and this country. And I just want to say thanks. I'm a huge, huge fan.
Well, I appreciate that. It's like, but it's like the work that you do. And I think that there are, I think there are a lot of people who are doing what they can in their own very different ways to like change, not just change, but to broaden the conversation about what it means to be engaged in politics as a woman, not only to bring more women to the table, but like to put them in back rooms and to have these conversations and to discuss what it means to be qualified, and and to have remarkable people like you who are willing to share and be vulnerable, in the wake of, a really tough loss, and to still, be optimistic about it, and, to not just share the good moments, but the hard moments as well. And to continue on in an ever increasingly challenging climate, thinking about the internet, and, it's not necessarily always the easiest space to be in, and to be a woman and have an opinion. Because there are always so many people who want to tell you that they know better and that you're wrong, and that you're doing this and this and this and this and this and this.
We'll
but
both
again,
get trolled hard after this. And like, who cares?
Yeah, but like literally, I mean, I think for me, it's the systems, and so much of this is like designed to make people not care. And it takes people like you who do care a lot, like a lot, to keep going and to do these things. And whether it's in the classroom or, on the ballot, like we really need you. And so I'm incredibly grateful that you run and you try and you do and you inspire and you encourage, all of those different metrics beyond winning, where you are 100% moving the needle. If it's through your books or, through the copies that you signed in the store and the girls who read them and saw them, like that they see a place for themselves in Canadian politics. That's amazing. So thank you.
Oh, thanks. That's very good.
So we'll I guess that's it for today. I think wrapping things up is always like the hardest. Like getting started is easy, but like coming to a conclusion is always, and then it's like,
we could talk for like 10 more hours.
I know, right? Yeah. So many things to talk about, but thank you again for your time. And for those who are listening. So the next few episodes are actually going to be conversations with the women of the UCP, the United Conservative Party, who are running in the leadership contest to take over the helm, to be the next premier of Alberta in the run up to the next provincial election as Jason Kenney moves along. So those will be a few different episodes, and those will be coming out in the next little while. But yeah, it'll be super fascinating conversations to hear the very different visions of what they see for Alberta moving forward. So thank you again to Kate today for joining me, and we'll see each other, talk to each other, tweet each other very soon, I'm sure.
Sounds good. Thanks a lot, Sarah.
Thanks.